a backgrounder on the project that we did, the general project, and then I'm going to go through this pretty quickly and then hand it over to Michael Stenta. Michael is the creator of FarmOS, which is an open source farm data management system based on the Drupal framework. And it's about as deep as I'm going to get into it. I'm going to let Michael get more into it here in just a minute. The background on this project is we had identified that there was a real lack of tools for, back up one step further. We identified that we didn't know anything about the record keeping tools that existed for produce growers, and with some funding from the Vermont Agency of Agriculture and the Vermont Housing Conservation Board Farm Viability Program, we were able to take a closer look at what was out there, assess them against what we understood to be the requirements for record keeping related to produce safety, and come up with some interim recommendations that led us to actually developing a system with Michael Stenta through FarmOS. The we in this case is myself and Michael Kilpatrick. Michael used to farm in Granville, New York, northern Washington County, New York, and is currently farming somewhere out in Ohio near Don, and also running running a farm consulting business as well. So Michael was able to help me get through some of the review of requirements, in which we leaned heavily on the PSA summary of those requirements as well. So purpose of today's call is to walk you through what we've done, where we've landed, and get your feedback on all of that, including making sure that we understood what you all summarized in terms of the produce safety rule requirements, but also very interested in everybody's feedback on usability of the tool and other ideas. So with that, this is a presentation I did at the Vermont Vegetable and Berry Growers Association meeting this winter to summarize where we had gotten at that point. And so I think the folks on the call probably understand the why of record keeping, and why we're doing what we were doing. The project, really the key thing that this project was aimed at was developing a short list of digital produce traceability solutions to try to make that record keeping a bit easier for folks to accomplish. And you can see our original plan was review what was out there, come up with a short list, pilot some of the options from that short list, and then roll out a program of training and technical assistance. Like any good plan, it didn't go to plan, and I'll tell you why. So these were the general requirements summarized from the produce safety rule, thanks to the PSA folks and some of your the individual record keeping slides in each module at the time we did this. And then also, I think since that point, since we did this, I think it was Kristen mainly developed the guidance, lowercase g guidance document on record keeping.
Oh, I had a lot of help with that.
Thank you. Good point. We did include a farmer survey. Actually, this was done prior to my involvement in this project, but there was a survey of growers regarding record keeping and tracking and traceability. And the key points here is that many were already doing some sort of tracking related to their harvesting and their packing. And you can see some of the level of detail they were getting into. Much of it was handwritten in field notebooks. Many, but not all, were labeling the crops at that time. This is fall, winter of 2014. Very, very few were using automated pre-printed labeling systems. As part of that survey, we also assessed technology use on the farm, and 100% use a computer, about 3/4 using a smartphone or tablet. and about a third using a smartphone in the field as part of their harvest record system. So we're trying to get a sense for what platforms people might be using. We also took a look at the survey took a look at buyer's perspective as well, trying to understand how tracking, traceability, and record keeping might be able to ease the market channels. So buyers, these are some of the anecdotal feedback, bits of anecdotal feedback coming from buyers. A lot of it has to do with legibility or just very clearly incorrect labels being on a product that they're receiving, or no labels at all. Grower obstacles to record keeping, some of the usual suspects: time, we're a small operation, we're stretched thin, lack of a good system, and specifically something that's easy to use. And then the other challenge, of course, at least in Vermont, is the diversity of crops being grown by a single enterprise and the complexity that introduces for some of the record keeping. And so the bottom line is what we heard from all this was make it quick, easy, and flexible. This was what folks were looking for. And so the main thing I want to focus on today was what we did and where we landed. And so Michael Kilpatrick and I looked at over 60 software solutions that indicated they had some sort of record keeping or traceability component to them. Based on initial review, 17 were selected for further study, and that down select either had to do with the cost of the solution, its applicability. For example, it might be really intended for tracking processed foods or food manufacturing rather than produce, or it just lacked some critical component of what was needed. We took a look at 5 really in-depth, and at this time, back in the winter, we were still looking into emerging solutions. Sorry. And so this is our initial ranking. We looked at Ag Squared in depth, that is Ag Squared, FarmOS, Tend, GapPro, HarvestMark, and FoodLogic Q. And ranked them according to not only the FSMA produce safety rule requirements on the bottom, but also grower requirements of cost. Is it mobile friendly? Does it allow off-network use by multiple language? Ease of use, data export or import, and is it customizable? And we can get into more on each of these, but these are just some screenshots of each and some summary assessments of each of them. Ag Squared, we looked at FarmOS, and that's where we ended up going, as we'll get into in a moment. GapPro, HarvestMark, and FoodLogic Q. Where we landed was there really none of the solutions that were commercially available off the shelf, addressed all of the requirements that we saw, especially with regard to the produce safety rule associated requirements. The other thing is they really aren't set up to cater to small, medium-sized operations that are highly diverse in terms of the crops they produce. So while good traceability software was available, nothing really was a complete solution besides GapPro. The issue with GapPro was it really lacked a number of pretty significant record-keeping requirements associated with produce safety rule. And in speaking with the firm that's responsible for it, didn't really seem interested in doing a whole lot of new product development or revision. And so where we had landed at this time was best near-term option, maybe Google Sheets plus a traceability option. So many of the growers we work with are using customized spreadsheets for much of this. And so we were looking at what could we do to ease onboarding of digital record keeping for folks by coming up with spreadsheet templates and things like that. But we also, at that time, really got into a conversation with Michael Stenta from FarmOS, and FarmOS was really, at that time, positioned to help with general farm data management. And so our conversation with Michael went to what could we do within FarmOS to make it more inclusive of produce safety.
Hey everyone, can you hear me?
I got you, Mike.
Sorry, my phone cut out a second there, so I missed the last part of what you were saying, Chris. Sorry about that. So I joined by computer audio instead. Oh, it looks like Chris said he lost audio.
Yeah.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Well, yeah, I can take over from there and move forward. Let me know if I cut out or anything. Can you guys see my screen right now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So yeah, just a little bit of context and background about FarmOS in general first, maybe, just to kind of set the stage. So I started FarmOS a couple of years ago as a project to help with my own record keeping. As an open source project, which means that the code is freely available and anyone can download it and host it themselves. So it's not a commercial piece of software. It's a piece of software that's owned by the community that's building it. So part of the process of kind of starting this up has been getting more and more people involved using it and involved in developing it too. So my hope is over time it can kind of build momentum of its own and you know, really take off like other open source software has. So when Chris and Michael approached me about the food safety record keeping, it seemed like a natural fit because the FarmOS platform is built on Drupal, so it's able to be extended by add-on modules. So you can add things to create very specific types of record keeping pretty easily. So that's kind of where we started with this, and I worked off of the sort of set of requirements that Chris and Michael put together after reviewing the Produce Safety Alliance documents and the food safety, produce safety rule requirements. And we kind of use that to determine what would need to be added to FarmOS in order to meet the same record keeping requirements. So that's kind of what I'll show you today. Feel free to ask any questions. I'll try to give a quick, brief overview of things, and then maybe at the end we can take some questions and look at some more specific things if there's any areas that didn't make sense. So this is what the FarmOS dashboard looks like when you originally log in. With FarmOS, you're able to map your farm. You can put in your fields. And your buildings and greenhouses, so that you can map out all your different areas and keep track of where things are. In addition to areas, you can manage your what we refer to as assets. So you can have your plantings, animals, equipment, all managed within the same system. And then are used to record things like activities, harvests, inputs, seedings, transplantings, etc. So that's the very general system that we built before the food safety modules were created. And you know, the main goal is to just provide a very granular system for all kinds of production records. So all of the stuff from seed through inputs and harvests, and finally to sales. So when we started building the food safety module, basically what we did is we decided which additional log types would be necessary. For example, worker health logs, training logs, water test logs were also added as part of this, and sales logs were also added. And then we also kind of put together this food safety dashboard. So this you can get to, but this kind of gives you an initial entry point into the food safety specific pieces of record keeping within FarmOS. So we broke the dashboard up into the 5 main areas: worker health, hygiene, and training, biological soil amendments, domesticated and wild animals, agricultural water, and equipment, tools, and buildings. Over on the right, you can upload documents. So, for example, you can upload documents including your food safety plan, standard operating procedure documents, training materials, recall plans, and other ones. And we can add to this list too, if that makes sense. So then those documents can be used as you're doing your record keeping. Underneath each of these, we're providing quick links to specific records that would need to be kept for the food safety rule. So under worker health, hygiene, training, we have links for adding training logs, worker health logs, facilities and first aid restocking. Then similarly, under biological soil amendments, we've got a link to the compost management section, logs for adding compost turnings, compost temperature observations, soil tests, and general soil inputs. Can you hear me still? I just want to make sure that I'm not.
Yep.
Yeah, you're doing fine.
We're all still here.
Yep. Yeah, you're doing fine.
Okay, great. So then going down under domesticated and wild animals, there's a link, animals on farm, domesticated animals. Links to create pre-planting risk observations and pre-harvest risk observations, intrusion or contamination observations, and corrective actions that would have to do with these things. Similarly, under agricultural water, you can record water tests, and these can be for both field water or for packhouse water, and also corrective actions for to deal with any issues that you find with water. And under things, you can manage your areas, manage your equipment, and then add logs for area cleaning and sanitizing and equipment cleaning and sanitizing. And so most of this dashboard is just links. It's sort of just guiding you into other parts of the FarmOS system, primarily so that you can then manage things like your plantings. So in FarmOS, you can have any number of plantings and any number of crops or varieties of that those plantings are of. So this just shows, for example, on a map, this is just a demo farm that we set up. You can click to see that here I've got German butterball potatoes planted, or over here I've got peas and oats as a cover crop. And all of your plantings are listed right here. So each planting is considered an asset. Hopefully get a granular record of everything that's happened with this planting. So for example, you can have your seeding logs, how much was seeded, where it was seeded, and transplantings if you're transplanting things. You can also have activity logs, observation logs, inputs, harvests, and sales. The same thing is of animal assets and equipment assets and compost assets. So each one of these things can be tracked as its own entity, and you can record logs alongside of it. So with this, we're able to provide a system that people can be very granular with the records that they're keeping about everything on the farm, and they can keep a trail from when they seeded something to all the inputs that went into it and all the inputs that went into the soil that it was planted into, to the harvests, and then to the sale of those things. So this food safety module that we put together we're basically calling this the first beta release, and we're it's really just a first pass at trying to get hit all of the points that were sort of organized by the Produce Safety Alliance to serve as a first pass and to start the conversation to see if there's more that can be done within this system and within this platform to really flesh it out and continue to make it easier to use. The other main point I'll make about this is that because it's built on FarmOS, the FarmOS system itself is continuing to develop and is starting to gain a lot of momentum on its own. So a lot of the usability and features of FarmOS itself will continue to improve even outside of the food safety module moving forward. So I think there's a lot of potential here, and I think it's a really exciting platform for people to start using and to start building upon. So that's the very general overview. I'm happy to go in more detail on anything, and if Chris or Michael, if there's anything you think that I might have missed in that brief overview or that is worth looking at in detail, feel free to jump in and let me know.
Thanks, Mike. I've got a couple ideas, but I'd love to hear what people think so far and if there are any questions.
This is Hans. I'm wondering, the input logs, could you show one of them? Are they, what kind of input screens are they, or are they templates that you would design and have there? I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll show a training log real quick, because that's a pretty simple example. So first of all, if I go up to this menu here, it shows I can get down to specific types of logs. So I'm just on the training log list now. So this will show all the trainings that have taken place in the farm. And logs in FarmOS have an ID, a date, and whether or not they are done is just checked on or off here. So you can plan your things in advance with this too. So you can plan trainings in advance, and you can have different types of trainings. So if I just click on this one, I'll show you what it looks like without editing it, but this is just sort of a very simple example. You have your date, the person who did the training, and in this case, it's just the admin user of the site. Normally, this would be someone's name, like down here. Training topics, this is also, again, just very simple. Categories, the area that it happened in, and the attendees. So let me just jump back. It's probably easier to just show what it looks like to add a training. So this is what a training log would look like. So I'll just collapse this so you get a general overview. All logs in FarmOS will have a couple of pieces to them. They'll have file attachments, so you can upload images or files. They'll have categories. They'll have notes. Some of them will have location. But then each log type, like training, seeding, harvest, will have stuff that is specific to that type too. So trainings, for example, have this field for training topics. So when you're adding a training, you would come in and say, this is the date that it's happened on or will happen on. These are the topics that we covered. This field is just for more of a detailed overview of the materials that were covered. Here you can say who did the, or one or more people conducted it as the trainer. So I can say that Chris and were the trainers here. And then who were the attendees? So I can say these workers were attendees. So that's kind of what a training log would look like. Similarly, let's see if I can show a worker health log. So if we're looking at the list of worker health logs, here's the one example one where John Doe has a broken arm. So if we're recording a new one, we would click Add Worker Health Log. We would select which worker it applies to, what the injury or illness was that was sustained, any action that was taken, whether or not they returned to work, and who is doing the reporting. And then you can also add more detailed notes if you need to, and if you have photos or something like that, you can also attach that. So that's kind of what.
Yeah, I'm assuming,
Go ahead.
so this, if you make a log and use it on your farm, you could, in its most general form, have that available as a template, if you will, for other farms to use? Or is it, you had mentioned this open source and how these things might be added to over time by users, and I'm wondering if that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, so there's probably different levels. So maybe I'll try to get a little bit closer to understanding what you're referring to. But I would say first that in general, each one of these types of logs is kind of a template in itself. Maybe you're thinking a little bit deeper than that though. But so each one of these has specific fields that you can fill in to, or that are defined to create the template for this log. So, for example, with the training, you have fields for who the trainer was, who the attendees were, the material that was covered. Those are sort of template fields for a training log. And then for a worker health log, you have these things like injury, illness sustained, action taken. So this sort of forms the template for the worker health log. And then similarly for like seedings and harvests, you have the quantity that was seeded or harvested, that kind of thing.
Right.
Does that kind of does that answer your question, or?
Well, yeah, sort of, but I guess I'm wondering how granular you can get with these templates. So, for example, with the training, if there were, I work with a group of farmers, and if they've decided on, 3 minimal standards to be covered in the training, and that those could be outlined in the log, they would already be, if you clicked into that log or could use it, they would be there as, here's the minimal items covered, and you can add to this or modify it, but these are kind of what this group has agreed upon.
Mike.
Oh, great. Yeah. So I actually have some thoughts on that. So right now you can kind of accomplish that by simply referring back to, I'll open up the food safety dashboard one more time. This document center that we created.
You could have your basic produce safety rule documents, and then an add-on might be your harmonized GAP documents or something like that.
I think that's
right.
Exactly.
So,
I think it's in the documents section. It might be the. Go ahead.
Yeah. So my thought was this document section is where you can add the sort of canonical documentation, or sorry, not documentation, but standard operating procedures and food safety plan documents, and then you could reference those in the training logs themselves. So that way you only have to upload it once, but then reference it. It'll be referenced in the logs themselves.
That makes sense.
And so this, what we have right now, you would still have to kind of manually reference it by saying, typing in the name of the file that you're referencing. But as we were kind of going through this process, we did sort of a first pass at a lot of these things, and then also started to put together a wish list of what maybe follow-up features or enhancements would be to make it even easier. And that was one of them, was to essentially, when you're adding a training, training is a good example, also have a field on here that gives you a drop-down of documents of specifically training material documents that you uploaded over here, so that you can reference those specifically. So that's not a very difficult piece to add. I think that would be a good next step there, just to make it that much easier.
Can you talk a little bit about the nuts and bolts of how you would see a grower using it? Do you think that they would have it on a mobile device and walking around the farm with it, or is this something they would keep on their PC and do at the end of the day or the end of the week?
Yeah, that's a great question. So FarmOS is a web application, which means it lives on a web server and can be accessible from anything with a browser. So yeah, you can access it from your phone, you can access it from a tablet, you can access it from a laptop. Anything that has internet and a browser can do it. And hopefully you'll still be able to see this. I'm going to resize my window. It's made to be mobile friendly and responsive, so it can actually responsive to the size of the device. You see that?
But it cannot be run locally. Is that correct?
Well,
offline.
so you can install it locally on a computer on your network, as long as you can access that network from your device. So it doesn't have to be installed on the World Wide Web publicly. It could be installed locally. But it is a website, so it has to run on a web server.
And I think also it's not currently set up to run offline without an internet connection because it is a web app. However, I'm hoping, Mike, you can also go over CSV uploads. And,
yeah, that's a great point. So, yeah, that is one of the limitations of FarmOS right now, is that it does require an internet connection to access it. So if you're out in the field and that's not available, another option, and one of the things that we developed part of this project, was CSV importers for all of the log and asset types, so that it's also possible to essentially just do your data entry in spreadsheet form, which can be done offline. There's spreadsheet applications you can install on mobile devices. And then that spreadsheet can just be uploaded to FarmOS later when you do have an internet connection to populate those things. And some people find spreadsheets easier to work with in the first place too. So that's another option.
Yeah, this looks really awesome. You guys have done a good job with it.
Thanks. Yeah, I've been working on it for a while, and the community has been growing quick. I was actually just up at NOFA this past weekend. I gave a session on it, and there was a lot of great discussion and a lot of interest.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not even on the food safety stuff specifically. That's just on the general system.
I have a quick question. This is Elizabeth. So in this idea of updating on your phone or something like that, does it allow for you to upload a photo of your record as an attachment, or does it have to be a spreadsheet or a Word doc, that kind of thing?
No, photos work perfectly. So, and that's what I use a lot. I'll go out with my phone, and here I'll just do a quick demo. You can see this, right, when I resized the screen.
Yep.
Does that? Here at my place, what I'll often do is just take observations. So I'll go to the observation logs. I'll click add an observation, and give it a quick thing like potato beetles spotted. And then you come down to file attachments, and on your phone. So what's really nice is, normally, what you do is you just click choose files, and that'll give you an upload form like you're used to from other websites. But on your phone, it actually also gives you an option to use your phone's camera, so you can directly take a photo and attach it right to this observation. So that's what I use a lot, because it's just a quick way of getting those observations. And just as an aside, actually, we've got someone else in the FarmOS community is starting to build a FarmOS mobile app specifically for observations, which actually will work offline and then sync back to your FarmOS when you have an internet connection.
So
that wasn't part of this project, but
that sounds like a really good addition, because just the syncing portion of it would be great for making an offline version of this that could then sync when it gets back online to
exactly.
Yeah.
So you could, even with just observations, you could do a lot of the food safety record keeping, like doing your pre-planting risk assessments and your pre-harvest risk assessments. You could go out with the mobile app and just take observations that way.
And I want to get back. Oh, go ahead, Don. Sorry, please.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't think I'm distracting us from the thread. I was wondering about one thing in particular is the required record you showed for training. One of the produce safety rule requirements is that particular record be reviewed and signed by a supervisor within a reasonable time frame, something along those lines. So when you're talking about making mods to a record, as in when does, is it going to be possible to add a signature from a supervisor and the date to that signature, and also a timestamp so that the regulators can have confidence that it wasn't a BS signature?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that wouldn't be something too difficult to add. Obviously, because it's a digital record, we would just have to think through what would be the best way to represent that. But we can very easily add more fields to this.
I mean,
so
one thought without adding a field would just be, a scanned copy of a sign-in sheet with a supervisor signature.
Yeah.
Upload that as a PDF. Done.
Attach that as a file.
Well, my follow-on question to that, which goes against the idea of scanned and I guess I see one of the real, if you could add analytics into this, and one of the reasons why the supervisor signature is important as far as I understand things is because then the supervisor knows who has been trained to do what task. So if instead of a scanned document you actually have the data fields, it feels like you can fairly simply make an analytic tool where you say, okay, who's been trained to add a sanitizer to the wash water? Who's been trained about harvesting, so that you can assign things to the appropriate tasks as an operational tool for your farm.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And actually, we talked about something similar to that, and we may not even need a signature field in order to do it. So what I was kind of thinking is if we go back and look at this training log. Let me just open this one up. So we have, we have the date that it happened, and the attendees who attended the training. If we had the person doing the training create this log when they did it, add the attendees, and then not mark it as done, the marking as done could be part of the review process. I'm just sort of thinking about possible workflows for that. Could be part of the workflow process, so that basically if it's marked done, that indicates that the supervisor signed off on it. So maybe only the supervisor is allowed to mark it done.
So you would have login, so that each manipulation would be tracked to who was logged in at that time.
Yeah, so we don't currently have that right now, but that is something that's on the general FarmOS roadmap. But yeah, so that would be important to be able to see exactly when they did that. Now that's something we could add very simply, specifically for the training piece, and less so in sort of the general FarmOS way. So yeah, I mean, that's definitely not too difficult to think through that. I think there's
I think that would be a really useful addition. The drawback to taking a picture of your logs and your training sheets is that you basically then have duplicate records, and somebody that wants to use this might just want to use this, so that signature component would be important.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, good point.
Yeah, I imagine that there'll be a number of different levels of use cases, and so, some folks might really just use it as an upload catch-all, and others might really get into the data portion of it, like to Don's point, analytics and planning. And so what's nice about it is the flexibility and sort of how it allows for you to use it at whatever level you really want. It's one of the things I like anyway.
I could see it being very useful. Sorry, Don.
Go ahead. Oh, you're fine.
Well, just very useful for organizing documents, just to have them categorized. So just uploading pictures would be useful. So go ahead.
And I was just saying I was geeked out about the possibilities. That's why I've been asking these questions. It all looks really cool.
Right.
One thing that struck me is, and because different people can use it in different ways, I was noticing that some of the records that you're designing this for could fit in a lot of different categories. And I suppose that's fine, because people will use it however they want to, but it would be tricky in an analytics setting. Like, are SOPs part of the equipment and sanitation section, or are they part of the training section, and things like that? Because different people would categorize things like that in different ways.
Yeah, that's true. And you know, we could easily add. So under this document section, there's this document type dropdown. We could expand this to include more granular information. Like we could have, like right now we've got training material as a type, SOP as a type, but we could split that out into other pieces if that made sense.
Well, the other thing, looking at that screen, the food safety plan is going to incorporate a lot of those other components. So I wonder if, I mean, if they have a food safety plan, would they then deconstruct their food safety plan and put it into the categories for this moving forward, and then they would have the option to just print out, you know, these things are part of my food safety plan?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I mean, I think it would be good to kind of think through some of these things and maybe develop a FarmOS workflow or a sort of a recommended approach to using FarmOS for food safety.
Yeah, Mike, that's kind of the line of thinking I'm on right now, because I'm working with this CAPS program, which does some of these things, but not potentially as well as this does. And so, yeah, some of the functionality specifically that would be great is to be able to, you know, export PDF summaries or Excel sheets out of completed logs, like the summary of them, which would then amount to, you know, something that could demonstrate compliance over time. So it's not like what's the output like of this, if you were to show that to someone else. And then the other thing I'm thinking about, obviously, is this produce safety plan, which that the log tool could be used or modified to write a food safety plan or a risk assessment, which would basically be a series of risk analysis and management strategies based on your farm that you would then report against with the logs. So, you know, say you're going to do something, and then you're actually going to report against that or verify that you did it. And so that would be the slickest thing, would be to have some way to walk you through that risk assessment, which would be the food safety plan, which could then be printed and exported as a single document. But for each of those sections, if there was a required record, then you would basically report against that plan in you know, with one of the logs if it was required.
Yeah, I like that. That makes sense.
Great idea.
Yeah. And then in terms of just to touch quickly on the sort of shared. So first of all, with FarmOS, you can have multiple user logins. So you can make one for each worker. But there's also different roles. So there's farm worker roles. There's farm manager roles. There's also a role called farm viewer, and a viewer has access to these records but can't change anything. So that was originally added for organic certification, so that you could share your FarmOS. You could create a login essentially in your FarmOS for your certifying agent, so that they could go in with a viewer role and just see all of the records that you're taking, just as an alternative to coming out and looking at paper records. So that is a potential, that's one potential way to share that information with the people that you need to share it with. But also, we do have a CSV export for all the lists in FarmOS. So you can actually come into these trainings or harvests or worker health and just export these as a CSV, so that can then be manipulated into whatever form you need and even saved as a PDF from there and shared.
Great. Yeah, this is great. A lot of potential. And what about the food safety plan? When you said that, this idea of using a tool, using the log tool to create a larger document that has many prompts, that would be the template.
Oops, sorry, I think I'm part of that. Could you repeat that?
Are you talking to me?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Okay, yeah, so the question is, what about using the log function to create a a larger template which would walk you through this assessment like you would do in an initial produce safety plan or risk assessment, and then connecting that somehow to other logs. I guess I'm wondering, you said good idea. Is that something that seems far off or like could be developed fairly easily?
Yeah. So probably how I would go about that is, and this actually strikes me as similar to another feature that I'm sort of planning for FarmOS more generally, and that's kind of a planting wizard for it would sort of be a process that you step through to answer questions, which then sets up a planting plan for you and can maybe handle successions and that kind of stuff. So this could be similar. Perhaps we could have a food safety plan wizard that you step through and answer certain questions, and from that, your logs are generated for you, automatically linked in the ways that they would need to be linked. And then you would essentially just have your plan that you would go through, and as the dates come, you check off whether or not they're done or not done, moving forward. Does that make sense? Is that kind of what you're thinking?
Sorry, I was muted. Yes, that does make sense to me.
Okay. Yeah. So I would say that's fairly simple to do. I think most of the work would just be in deciding what that wizard looks like and what it needs to do. But I'm sure a lot of that's, you have a lot more experience with that already. So I bet a lot of those decisions are already made.
How about Rachel? Did you have anything you wanted to add to this?
Mostly just soaking it all in. I think it's awesome.
Cool.
No, you guys have done some really great work, and I think this is going to be super useful.
Thanks,
yeah,
Rachel.
when I think this is incredible too, and I certainly am pleasantly surprised. I thought this was a traceability thing, but it's so much more than that. So, and Michael, you might know I've been working with another platform which is trying in a lot of ways, and this is a completely fresh look at potentially a way to do what we're trying to do that would be more versatile potentially.
Oh, that's great to hear. Yeah, I'd love to follow up.
and robust. And the one thing that this other platform does have is the ability for groups of people to share viewer access, basically, which we are calling a share page at this point. But and that is almost an umbrella. So if a particular buyer group or co-op, or in this case the Vermont veg and berry growers with 90 people, 90 users could opt in to a thing that would automatically make all the people using that in that system have viewer status.
Okay.
And then have that list.
So you could use it for group gap, and the group gap
right.
manager could see everybody's records. Wow.
And
Nice.
so Mike Stenta went over the user roles that are currently established as, farm manager, farm worker, viewer, but there could also be, a consortium role.
Yeah,
for example,
that's
that
right.
Anybody who's a member of that consortium could log into and have some level of access to everybody's records and share SOPs, or if that were the case, or things like that. So,
what would be the slickest thing in there is if there was even some resolution in that control, so they could share their produce safety plan, but they don't necessarily share certain records. That would be really cool.
Right. I mean, Drupal is really a spreadsheet / database on steroids. And so if you think about anything you could possibly do on a spreadsheet or a database, you can do it on Drupal in a really clean way. It's really a matter of having the brains that Mike Stenta has and time and money. So the challenge.
Yeah, I agree.
One of the challenges with this project is what's the minimum amount of functionality we can get to to claim at least initial completion, and to try to get folks using it and learn as a community going forward. And so, we really took the Produce Safety Alliance record keeping document and tried to start there and say, this is the bare minimum we should all try to work toward. So, but yeah, tremendous potential for where to go next. And one of the key reasons we landed on this as a development platform was I kind of came to the conclusion that produce tracking, traceability, and produce safety record keeping, they're really just another component of farm management and farm data management. And so rather than building a separate system for produce safety related record keeping, why not piggyback on something that's really targeted towards farm management? And one of the challenges we ran into is we really were hoping that there was something like an Ag Squared, another commercially available piece of software that wanted to take that on. And the responses we got were generally, not really interested. So that's kind of why we landed where we did. I want to give Mike Kilpatrick a chance to chime in if he's got a second, if there's anything you want to add, Michael.
Not really. I just, I guess, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, my microphone is a little bit high at the moment, so I'm just going to bring that down to make that hopefully a little bit easier.
You sound good.
All right, good. There we are. So I guess the only thing I would say is there's been some great feedback on this and like ways we can take this to the next level too. So, Mike, are we capturing that? Is that going to, or should they just go on to the FarmOS feature request and add that stuff there? Obviously, we're out of money at this phase, but at some point you may be able to add it as you have time.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we kind of put together a wish list as we were working through our own development. So I have it on my list that I'm still planning on doing is publishing those as feature requests in the GitHub repository for this, so that they're public and other people can, if they want, pick them up to develop them or work on them, or also so that we can work them into roadmaps for sort of phase 2 of this project. I think it would be great if we could get everyone on this call to just play around a little bit with this sandbox that we set up. I'd be happy to set you all up with Farm Manager logins here, so that you could actually go in and try it out and poke around and bang on it and see what you think. And then maybe if we,
I would love to do that. Yeah.
Great, yeah. Maybe we can just organize some thoughts via an email thread, and then I can organize them into the feature requests or bug reports if you find any.
And the other thing we have planned is I think we set aside funds for 6 farms to pilot this.
That's right.
Over the next year, and so Michael's on board for providing support for that.
2 years actually.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah. So that is there, and yeah, I would say Mike Stentig, as long as nobody objects, I think give everybody a chance to get in on the sandbox and mess around with it. It'd be great.
Sure. Yeah. Should I just use all I need are some names and email addresses. Should I just use the email thread that went out originally?
It works for me, and I guess if anybody doesn't want to, just send Michael a note. He's on the original invite to this. But I'm guessing almost everybody on this call can't wait to dig in.
I imagine Don feels the same way I do.
You said the magic words. It's like a spreadsheet on steroids.
Right.
How could you resist?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. The biggest challenge is managing expectations on this, because you can definitely come up with lots of places to go.
Oh yeah, the FarmOS wish list in general is already huge, but it's great. There's a lot of great ideas and a lot of feedback, and people are really getting behind it.
Yeah. But
the community is growing quick.
Let's see. So we're rounding out about an hour here, and I want to first of all thank everybody for making some time to go through this with us this afternoon. Your feedback's been wonderful, really helpful. And I know you all spend more than your fair share on teleconferences and webinars, so thank you for carving out the time. Any final thoughts, questions, comments?
No, but thank you for getting this started. It'll be very useful, I think.
Yeah, as Kristen and I go around the country talking to growers, this is one of the things that comes up over and over again: is how do we control this? How do we manage it? So a tool like this can be really valuable.
Great. Good.
Yeah, I'm really excited to explore this tool in my project here.
Thanks, Hans. I thought there'd be a lot of good overlap for maybe next generation or future stuff.
Yeah, totally. We'll continue that conversation, Chris.
Great.
This is Rachel. I just had one final thought. I kind of missed the part of the conversation where this was going, but just a thought about transparency, the record piece. I totally get and appreciate the transparency with the food safety plans, but I do wonder if we may run into some resistance or concerns about the transparency around actual records. So just to kind of put that out there as maybe something to talk about.
So user privacy controls?
Right.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
Right, uploading it to a server. Mm-hmm.
Oh,
yeah.
I see. So sorry, I just want to make sure I understand, Rachel, that concern. So generally the idea of having a private account on a server that could be hacked, or the idea of sharing something with a larger group?
I think putting out plans is a really great thing to do, kind of help people understand what to shoot for.
Yep.
But I wonder about the use of having the records out there with kind of the trade-off of privacy concerns. And I mean, well, yeah.
I'm having a little hard time hearing you, but I can connect with you offline, make sure I understand that concern. But generally, it's a privacy.
I might just add just to make sure that maybe this wasn't clear at the beginning though too, is FarmOS by default is private. So any record is not visible to the public. You do need to log into it in order to see anything. We do offer the ability to sort of share things by giving logins, but by default it's all private. So I don't know if that affects or if that applies. But.
And Rachel's communicating with us via the chat box. She's got a bad phone connection. The concern was about record transparency, not hacking. So yeah, okay. And she says, great,
gotcha. Okay.
Great, thanks for clarifying. So.
Okay, great.
Cool. Any other final thoughts?
Nope, I'm going to jump off and jump on another call though. But thank you very, very much, guys.
Thanks, Kristen.
Great.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Too. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great afternoon. Yep. Bye.
Yeah, thank you.